It's time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Time magazine has named South Korea's capital of Seoul as one of the 50 greatest places of 2022, naming it the smartest city. It highlighted various aspects of the city's high-tech features like self-driving shuttle buses at Incheon International Airport, air quality improvement devices on public transport and unlimited Wi-Fi service, of course. But more than anything, it emphasized how Seoul is the first city government to integrate with the Metaverse, introducing an even more tech-savvy way of living in the iconic Asian capital. We discuss today what makes Seoul the smartest city on earth and what it's doing to become an even better place to be, charting a path to economic recovery and investing in sustainability, as Time magazine put it. For this, I'm joined in studio by Andrew Lim, Research and Innovation Attaché at the Government of Quebec in Seoul. Very warm welcome to you, Mr. Lim.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to see you offline. We used to do quite a lot of interviews online, I believe, but nice to be with you in studio. And well, first of all, you've actually worked with Seoul government, on its smart city projects, and now as an innovation expert as well. What features of Seoul City really stood out to you as being a smart city?
I mean, before I start talking about all the cool tech and everything, I think one of the biggest things Seoul government has done is, if you think about Seoul government, it is a public entity, obviously, and they have certain restraints, for example. But still, they went beyond the call of duty and they actually started taking risks. And when we look at like Korean government or public sector in general, that could be quite difficult. But still, they took the risk and they did a lot of innovative things, such as the Metaverse, which we'll probably talk about later. And some of the really cool things besides taking risks and this kind of a framework is their traffic system. Maybe a lot of the people have heard there's a traffic operations center in the city hall called TOPIS, T-O-P-I-S. The acronym is Traffic Operation Information Center, and it's actually located in the basement of City Hall. So the reason for that is it's kind of made into this bunker system, so that in case some emergency happens, maybe someone attacks or there's an earthquake, they could actually still run Seoul City, within the traffic system and other emergency services inside City Hall for at least like a month or two. So they have like water and food and everything to be able to provide public services even when there's a huge disaster. I think that's like planning really ahead. So these things, that's really impressed me is this kind of system that they know even if there is an emergency, we will be there for the citizens.
Right, and these emergency measures to keep the city smart, stocking up on all that water and ramyeon, I imagine. And well, so there was quite a lot of attention on how Seoul is a smart city. So first, what really are the crucial elements of a smart city?
So I mean, smart city, people understand it's probably about tech, that's obvious. But I think one of the biggest things people do not realize is through smart city, or even before smart city, there's data. And people say, data is the new oil. So there's many ways to gather data. Obviously, there's like IoT sensors, and it could be word of mouth, this kind of stuff. But the crucial thing about smart city is to be able to utilize this data and then make citizens' lives better. For example, maybe there's some air quality sensors around Seoul, I'm sure you know, and they provide fine dust data. And with this kind of data, maybe there's certain regions in Seoul where the fine dust is even worse. So people could look at this data and think about why is this happening, and then mitigate it so that people have fresher air in that area. Maybe it's because there's a lot of cars in that particular area, or a lot of cargo vehicles, and because, for example, the tire traction, there's a lot of pollution. So if they know about this, then they could mitigate it by putting filters or redirecting traffic somewhere else to kind of give people a breath of fresh air. So this kind of data is, I think, very important. But what's even more important is before doing all these smart city tech stuff, people have to realize smart city is still about people. So it has to be human-centric. It's not about like putting the tech and people will use it, which is somewhat true, but sometimes they may not. Then we could kind of say maybe our tax dollars might have been a bit wasted. So we have to take into consideration human behavior and make it very human-centric. So kind of investigate how people may use this, put capacity building in the forefront, train them so that they know this technology is beneficial, and we get to learn, are people are using this, not using it, how can we make it better so that people actually use it for their own benefit.
So it's not just about the hardware, but it's really taking these numbers, this data, and adding value to it, which in turn adds quality to our lives.
Oh, yes.
Well, Seoul City, you mentioned the transportation system, and I want to talk more about that actually. So Seoul really adopted very innovative policies and tools to incorporate various types of mobility solutions together. And now it's looking to take things to the next level, which was also mentioned by the Times Magazine feature. It's looking into air mobility, it's looking into taxi hailing for self-driving vehicles. So does Seoul currently have the capacity to support this kind of system? And is Seoul unique in pursuing these kind of services, or are other cities pursuing this kind of integrated solution as well? That's
actually a very good topic, because I think most metropolises, their biggest problem is traffic. I mean, everyone's complaining about traffic congestion, the pollution of it, and therefore they have public transportation system. But obviously that's not enough, because you can't just move people around through subways or taxis. So Seoul did have a lot of initiative. They started around 2017-18, and they designated an area in Seoul. It's the Sangam area, or there's a subway station called the Digital Media City. It's a bit far away from here, but still they kind of designate that area as kind of the automated vehicle testbed area. So they actually, Seoul Metropolitan Government, they partner with Hyundai, obvious Hyundai Motors. It is one of Korea's biggest companies, and they tested out some of their automated vehicle features. So I think you guys covered it a little bit during the news. The automated vehicle, there is a level of like a system level, like for example, 1 to 5. 1 is basically, it's not really automated. 5 is full automation. You could probably sleep in the car and it'll be okay. So they're testing it for now, they're testing it for a level 3 capacity. So it's kind of automated, but still you have to be in the car, you have to be aware, but it'll still kind of self-drive. And they're hoping to have it to level 4 around 2025, 2027. And this is, it's impressive. It's good that Seoul's trying to do this, because like a lot of metropolises, and this is kind of the killer app in smart cities. If you could actually, take a car and not drive and just sleep there or work, that would be a very beneficial thing for everybody, from pollution to congestion to everything. But then the biggest problem of this is the data, actually. Because if you think about it, if you really want cars to be fully automated, it has to take into account all the emergency situations. Maybe a child might pop out somewhere because they're playing with a soccer ball or something, and obviously you don't want to hit a child or anything. But to obtain this kind of data for the car to kind of learn, deep learning, machine learning, all that stuff, you can't like put a child in front and actually do this. That's unethical. So like, typical traffic data is very easy to obtain. You have your car, put your LiDAR and camera and just drive it around, that's great. But usually you won't run into those emergency situations. So what some of the new innovation that's come into this automated vehicle area is they utilize something called synthetic data. Maybe you've heard of something like this. So basically what they do is they render a model synthetically into the computer to be able to learn about these emergency situations without really doing it in real life, because there's a risk of hitting a child. But if you put it as a synthetic data, it's not real. But still the AV, the program, the software will see it as real, and they'll be able to learn from this data. So this has been an emerging field. It's still emerging, but this is a crucial component of automated vehicle, because that's the most important thing, safety. You don't want to hit people, you don't want to hit other cars, and these emergency situations, it's not easy to really like have it in real life. Yes.
I see. And well, having lived as a foreign resident in Seoul for a number of years, would you say that many of these digital infrastructural features, they do translate into real life, and you actually feel the impact of these in everyday life?
Yes, actually, yes. As a Canadian, as a foreigner, I've been in Korea for some time now. Like, this is kind of smart city, but there's some personal, I guess, digital tech that I've been seeing develop a lot for foreigners. For example, when I first came to Korea like several years ago, foreigners in Korea, we have ID numbers. So do Korean nationals.
Alien numbers.
Yes, alien numbers, yes, you could call it. It used to not work. because the Korean national numbers, they're very standardized. It's everyone has it, but foreign alien numbers, as you call it, they start with different numbers and etc. So when you try to register for certain things like even like neighbor email or Korean services, back in several years ago, it didn't work. As in, it said it was invalid. But then the government realized, there's quite a lot of foreigners in Korea now, maybe around like 1 to 2 million people, and they were having difficulties accessing the digital, public services. So they realized this and they had consultations and they finally implemented this. So almost every public system, and because of the public initiative, the private sector also went in and did this too. Like telecom companies, sometimes you weren't able to register for certain apps, etc. But now, like that's fully in place, which is, I think, quite impressive. Also, some of the other smart city-ish foreign policies that they've also implemented is there's something called the Seoul Global Center. Maybe you've heard of this. It's an initiative actually by the current mayor when he was the mayor back in the late 2000s. He took some data and he realized, hey, we should open these foreign kind of centers to help foreigners acclimate or adapt to Korean culture. And these infrastructure, these buildings, they're placed in places where they obtain the data to see where foreigners live, and they put it in very convenient locations. So they use data, and I think smart cities, this is what smart cities is about. Tech, IoT, all that stuff, but to make lives better for people. So I actually visited some of these centers. Some of them do visa processing, for example, so you could go online and actually reserve now. Before you had to call or IDs didn't work, but now it works. So I think this is I know it's kind of minor, but it's very personal to me. So this is a very successful case.
Hopefully we'll see that data being used to provide more customizable services to our foreign residents as well. And well, now Seoul is the first city government to integrate with the Metaverse, as was pointed out by the Time article. And well, really, when we hear about the Metaverse, well, perhaps for people like me, it still sounds like a bit of a buzzword. So is there anything really concrete to this? Is it really going to help the city become even smarter, basically?
Yeah, so Metaverse, I think some of the audiences and people have heard of it, buzzwords like Metaverse, NFT, blockchain. It's come out a lot, and it has to do with smart cities, but quite often, as you mentioned, is it real? Is it just a buzzword? Will it be just around for a short term? Is it a waste of time and money? So there's a lot of these questions, and of course, we don't know the future, like, in 5-10 years, but I think what's really unique is at least the Seoul government is trying. They're early adopters, they're taking risks, and I think Metaverse, it had its role, especially during the corona pandemic, although we could say it's still kind of happening. So just recently, Seoul launched a initiative called Metaverse Seoul. Yes, original name, but still, yes, Metaverse Seoul. And what they did is basically they want to, and they're doing it right now, they're putting many other public services into the Metaverse. So for example, if you wanted to have some license printed about yourself, you maybe just go on the web, put your ID and just get it this way. But now they could try to actually go into the Metaverse, make an avatar of yourself, walk to the actual office digitally, and then even like talk to other people there, other citizens, or especially the public servants. Because if you access it through online, yes, you could. There's some chat feature sometimes, but it feels very disconnected. But now they could actually go online and actually get public services, and there are disadvantages because yes, in person may be the best, but if you go through the Metaverse, maybe you don't have to take your car, reduce traffic congestion, reduce pollution, etc. So there's a lot of advantages, but you're right, still somewhat in the early stages. But I know Seoul is taking the forefront in this. They were recently invited to an MIT event, actually, and the Director General of Smart Cities Division, he went and he presented it, and he's actually looking for a lot of collaboration internationally. Obviously, it's good to promote these things, but then Seoul is great, but you always have to work together with other people to see the flaws and the benefits and make it something like tangible so that people could actually use it, although they are kind of using it. But if I had to say what is the Metaverse, right now it's getting along, but maybe you saw some movies called like Ready Player One or Surrogate by Bruce Willis. I think this is a true Metaverse, and people know this, but we're somewhat ways away, but at least we're getting there, and I think this is what makes it really unique. We're trying.
I think a couple of years ago, maybe in 2020, we saw Samsung launch AI humans and ventures like that, bringing AI or avatars into everyday life and having them consult in a sense. So having public servants or providing public services through these kind of metaverse features, maybe they will become more personable than what we currently experience, given all the red tape and the bureaucratic sort of headaches that we go through on a daily basis. But well, as Seoul and other cities become more and more digitalized, it looks like they're going to have to include more people, become more inclusive, and also cities are looking to cooperate as well. So what are some areas of cooperation that you see between Seoul and also Quebec?
That's a good question. So as you mentioned, smart city innovation tech, Korea is very innovative, but still you cannot do it alone because, other cultures, other ethnicities, they have different ideas, they have different way of doing things, and that brings about a lot of this conglomerate effect, as in it gives a lot of advantages. So actually, I went to on a business trip to Canada, Quebec recently, and we signed a lot of new agreements. So for example, there's a lot of commonality between Quebec and Korea. For example, they both, I guess, suffer from I guess we call it the elderly problems. For example, birth rates, but also through Corona, we realized the elderly are very vulnerable. Old folks' homes, these places, it was quite ravaged by Corona and all that. So both governments realized, hey, we need to do something to help these elderly people, bridge the digital divide, but also help them with health. So we actually recently concluded an agreement with an entity called the Seoul Digital Foundation, and in Quebec, an entity called MedTech. They actually came together, we met them, we signed an agreement to do some joint research and do programs on age technology. So for example, it could be something like some IoT sensor in an elderly person's home to see if they are moving. Something like this, or a sensor in their rice cooker, so that if they use it regularly, we know they're okay. But maybe they haven't used it for a while. Then it'll alert the public officials in that district, and they will actually give them a call to see if they're okay. And if they're not picking up, they may pay a visit just to check they're not like unconscious somewhere, things like this. So we are working on these kind of technology to put in budget together and kind of do a call for application. So startups and companies and citizens with ideas will, come up with good ideas, and we'll pick them and help them innovate, and we'll try to use and implement that technology in our everyday lives to help the elderly. So there's actually a lot of exciting things going on.
All right, it does sound incredibly exciting, and as Seoul continues to move forth in its smart city ventures, hopefully there'll be room for more collaboration as well to make society really smarter, more digitized, and obviously more inclusive and livable as well. So, well, thank you very much for your time today, Mr. Andrew Lim, Research and Innovation Attaché at the Quebec Government in Seoul.
Yes, thank you for having me.